The first thing Tessa Morgan noticed about Valcour Interstellar Academy was that no one looked like they expected her to survive the semester. Not in a you might struggle with the math sort of way, more like you might die on the obstacle course before lunch. Every corridor whispered it. The stares from reptilian-eyed cadets, the flick of furred ears, the polite silence after someone asked, "You're from Earth?" followed by a pause like they were remembering a tragic historical documentary. She adjusted the strap on her duffel and squared her shoulders. She wasn't here to change minds, just make it to graduation with all her bones intact. Unfortunately, Drill Commander Corin Vex had other plans. The Scary towered over the cadets as they lined up for morning inspection, his armored tail tapping the floor with rhythmic disdain. He stopped in front of her and tilted his massive head. "You are the human," he announced. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Tessa nodded once. "Tessa Morgan, Earth, North American Union, 3rd Rotation Volunteer." Vex gave a gravelly exhale. "I've seen your kind. Soft skin, slow reflexes. Your planet was only invited here as a courtesy, like bringing a hatchling to a war council." Somewhere down the line, someone snorted. She didn't look to see who. "And yet," Vex continued, pacing now, voice raised so everyone could hear, "this academy is expected to waste training hours on you." He turned back to her, smile like a rusted blade. "I propose a duel." The snort turned into stunned silence. A few cadets stopped breathing altogether. Tessa blinked. "I've been here 4 hours." "Then you should still be fresh." She stared at him. He was baiting her, setting her up to fail before she had a chance to prove herself in class, on the track, in simulation. A public humiliation recorded, remembered, and played back in every mess hall for weeks. She nodded slowly. "All right." A few cadets actually gasped. Tessa kept her eyes on Vex, jaw tight. "If we're doing this," she said, "then you're going to need a medbay on standby." There was no ceremony to it, no time to warm up, no chance to second guess. The duel was sanctioned on the spot, broadcast over the quad's combat training display. Vex had the authority to make it real. One instructor, Charn, a grim-looking Heskali with bioluminescent eyes, signed off under educational objective. Tessa stood in the ring, carved into the sand-dust floor of the open training dome, unarmored except for padded gloves and a chest guard that didn't quite fit her right. Her right shoulder was already aching from over-tightening the strap. Across from her, Vex rolled his neck slowly, the sound like rocks grinding underwater. His species, the Scari, were known for their dense musculature and near-redundant organ layering. Even their failures in battle tended to walk away. Tessa would not. She exhaled through her nose and shifted her stance. Her fingers twitched in time with her heartbeat. She could feel at least 70 cadets watching from the sidelines, a few whispering translations into earpieces. "You don't have to do this," hissed the cadet next to her before the duel began. He was slim, blue-skinned, with a nervous tremor in his eye stalks. "Vex doesn't pull punches." Tessa glanced at him sideways. "Neither do I, just not with fists." The match bell rang. Vex moved first. His legs swept sideways with terrifying speed, catching her hip. She staggered, barely dodging the full momentum of it, but her shoulder slammed into the ground with a jolt that made her vision spot. She rolled, scrambled upright. Her right arm burned. She couldn't tell if it was muscle strain or something worse. Vex advanced again, smirking. He didn't see the torque in her hips or how she angled her feet. He didn't notice her timing, his breathing. He definitely didn't expect the pivot. Tessa ducked under the wide arc of his arm, stepped into his space, and drove a precise upward strike into the narrow juncture where his lower jaw met his skull, an angle she'd only known from studying Scari physiology manuals during the transport ride to Valcour. Her elbow locked behind the hit, channeling the force from her core. His head snapped back. There was a stunned pause in the crowd, followed by a massive thud as Commander Vex hit the ground, flat, unmoving. The silence was absolute. Tessa stood over him, arm trembling, her own legs wobbling slightly from the rebound of the hit. "Medbay," someone muttered, then louder. "Commander down, get Medbay in now." Charn was already moving. The medical team arrived less than a minute later. Vex was strapped into a grav stretcher, unconscious and bleeding from a hairline split along his temple. A training drone was dispatched to follow, recording vitals and muscle tremors. Tessa didn't move until the stretcher disappeared out of sight. When she finally did, it was to sit down heavily on the sand floor. She clenched her teeth and cradled her right shoulder, now screaming in pain. She didn't speak as two cadets helped her to her feet. Her ribs ached from the earlier hit. Her shoulder felt wrong. Not just sore, but off. Dislocated, maybe. She hoped it was just a sprain. Charn met her eyes with a look she couldn't place. Not approval. Not exactly. Report to Medbay B. Immediately. Tessa nodded, still winded. As she limped off the training floor, someone whispered behind her. Did that just happen? It was a clean anterior shoulder dislocation, the medics confirmed. No fracture, thankfully, but severe soft tissue strain. She'd need 3 weeks minimum of partial immobilization, followed by rehab therapy to regain range of motion and strength. No upper body combat training during that time. She was also bruised across the side from Vex's opening strike, thankfully no internal damage, just muscle trauma. She'd also bruised the knuckles of her left hand from the counterblow. Nothing serious. A small fracture might still form depending on swelling. They scanned her twice just to be sure. The nurse, well, the equivalent was a Kivaran named Lan, who gently warned her to avoid showing up in medbay with shattered limbs next time. Tessa gave a faint grimace. No promises. She left the clinic with her right arm in a sling, walking stiffly back to her assigned dorm pod, unsure whether she was about to be expelled or promoted. When she opened her terminal that night, the fight was already everywhere. Someone had leaked the footage from the training ring. Edited versions were circulating, with everything from dramatic music overlays to pop-up text that read, "And the human struck back." Vex's unconscious body had become a looping GIF across dozens of sub-channels. One meme simply said, "He took the first hit," smirking she hit back, and he woke up asking, "What year is it?" 2 days later, he did. Corin Vex groaned awake in Medbay Alpha, surrounded by sterile lighting and the distant hum of tissue regen units. His vision adjusted. He tried to sit up and failed. His side screamed at him. "Lie still," someone said. He turned his head. A medical officer, species unknown, checked the vitals display. "You took a cranial hit," they said. "Minor skull fracture, concussion, and 3 cracked ribs. You'll be on restricted duty for at least 6 weeks. Vex blinked slowly. "What year is it?" The medic raised an eye ridge. "Still the same one, Commander." Corin Vex was cleared to walk 4 days after regaining consciousness, though walk was generous. His gait was stiff, labored, and punctuated with occasional grunts whenever his cracked ribs reminded him that breathing was, in fact, optional when pride was at stake. The helmet came on day 5, not for protection but to avoid the relentless stares. Not just from cadets, either. Staff looked at him differently now. Not pitying, Vex would have preferred that. No, it was worse. They looked curious. Like he had become a walking riddle in need of dissection. He stopped attending meals in the mess hall. The footage hadn't died down. If anything, it had evolved. Some digital prankster had rendered a slow-motion 3D version of the hit with labeled physics vectors. Mass X acceleration equals human victory, the title boasted. Another had turned it into an old Earth combat sim, 8 bits, graphics, and all. Vex caught himself watching one of the edits late one night in his quarters, jaw tightening. He didn't even remember the moment she hit him. One blink, he was standing, the next he was horizontal, and someone was trying to shine a light in his eye. He replayed the video, slowed it down, watched her footwork, her positioning. She hadn't guessed. That strike had been trained, practiced. Human fragility didn't matter when you knew exactly where to land the force. Corin Vex, first-class combat instructor of Valcor Interstellar Academy, had been taken out by someone who weighed half his mass and didn't even have bone plating. It was enough to make him reconsider a few of his core philosophies. But not publicly. Not yet. Tessa Morgan was, in theory, a rising star. In practice, she was just trying to sleep through the night without her shoulder flaring up or her inbox pinging with new interview requests. Is it true you used a human boxing move? Is it true you threatened the commander before the duel? Would you be open to teaching a self-defense seminar? She deleted them all. Her days were slow now, ruled by med-ordered physical therapy and restricted drills. The rehab chamber smelled like sterile algae gel, and most of her sessions were supervised by a tall, humorless medic named Grenth, who barked instructions with the charm of an AI toaster. Raise your arm again. Stop wincing. I'm not wincing. You're wincing. I'm not. You're also lying. Still, her range of motion was improving. The inflammation had subsided. She could now lift her arm to shoulder height without grinding pain, and the sling had been downgraded to a compression brace. The goal was full mobility in 3 weeks. The academy, meanwhile, was in upheaval. Adaptability drills had been added to the morning schedule. Strategy lectures started including Earth history references. Tessa overheard an instructor explain guerrilla warfare using the Vietnam framework, which prompted 3 confused alien cadets to research what a jungle was. Tessa kept her head down. Mostly. Except when Cadet Sulin, a brass-gear female, with 4 arms and the subtlety of a collapsing moon, stopped her outside Simulation Room 3. You broke Vex, she said. I didn't mean to. That's why it's better. Tessa blinked. What? Vex breaks cadets. He broke my cousin's ankle in basic. You didn't come here trying to prove anything, and you still made him see stars. Tessa scratched at the edge of her brace. He got a skull fracture. That's not funny. Sulin tilted her head. That's because you're not from here yet. You'll get it. The academy's social shifts weren't immediate, but they were unmistakable. For the first time, cadets began sitting next to Tessa in the mess hall voluntarily. She found herself fielding questions about Earth's combat philosophy, nutrition, and once, absurdly, about why humans wore socks. I don't understand, said a curious Naharathi cadet. Is it ritual? For grip? Is it insulation? Tessa, halfway through a protein wrap, just said, yes, and left it at that. What surprised her more was when instructors began referencing her duel in a clinical tone. See the mistake Commander Vex made here? Barked Instructor Kavan during sparring class, pointing at a training hollow. Too confident. Assumed mass equaled victory. It doesn't. Cadet Morgan demonstrated that clearly. Use momentum against your opponent, no matter their species. Tessa nearly dropped her water bottle. More cadets started mimicking Earth-style dodges in sparring practice. A pair of juniors asked her how to properly rotate into a hook punch. She hesitated. Her arm was still only halfway healed, but walked them through it slowly. By week 2, her shoulder was able to manage light resistance bands. She still couldn't spar, but her mobility was 80% restored. Grenth was pleased, which, in his language, meant, you'll only need 1 more week before combat clearance. She nodded. Good. I need to hit something again. He gave a rare smile. Just not the commander this time. On day 17, someone knocked at her door. Tessa was shirtless, mid-brace removal for stretching exercises, and had to scramble for her Academy-issue thermal top before calling out, "Come in." The door hissed open. She froze. Commander Corin Vex stepped inside, not in full armor, but in dark duty fatigues with a distinct limp. He stood taller than she remembered, maybe because she was used to seeing him unconscious. She braced herself. Mentally, at least. I didn't know you knew how to knock, she said before she could stop herself. To her shock, Vex chuckled. I've had time to reflect. She stepped back, giving him space. You're walking. Mostly. My ribs say I'm an idiot. He paused. They're correct. Tessa folded her arms carefully. Here, to deliver a late punishment? Not exactly. He looked around her quarters like he expected some hidden weapon cache. I watched the footage, many times. Tessa didn't respond. You didn't get lucky, he continued. I told myself that at first, that it was a fluke. It wasn't. A beat passed. You trained, you aimed, you knew where to strike. Tessa's throat felt dry. And you're not mad? I'm furious, he said, then added, at myself. That shut her up. I disrespected you, your species. I judged based on muscle mass and bone density. He turned toward her, his voice quiet. You fought like a soldier, not a human, not a scary, just a soldier. Tessa stared at him. I appreciate that, she said, uncertain. He nodded once. I'm reinstating you to combat class next week. Cleared for contact drills only. You'll be monitored. Tessa raised her eyebrows. You read my med chart? I asked. He replied simply. And I waited until I was sure you weren't concussed, unlike me. She smiled despite herself. I guess next time, we both wear helmets. Vex gave a low grunt. Not quite agreement, not quite a joke. Before he left, he turned at the door. One more thing. Tessa looked up. Never do that again. She smirked. No promises. Combat drills were different now. Not for Tessa alone, but for the academy. The shift was subtle, woven into the routines with just enough deniability for instructors to pretend nothing had changed. And yet, it had. Every fourth warm-up cycle now included techniques adapted from human close-quarters combat. Torque lever pivots. They were labeled in the manual, though no one mentioned the word boxing. A simulation module quietly added a setting labeled asymmetrical physiology. Earth-tier combatants, complete with motion capture from Tessa's recorded duel. Vex had approved it personally. Not that he said as much. The commander had returned to his usual demeanor, sharp, unrelenting, but there was something new under the surface. Not softer, smarter. He still barked orders, still made first years cry, but when he demonstrated a new maneuver, he adjusted his stance slightly to favor his healing side. And when he corrected a cadet's form, he occasionally muttered something like, "Your spine is not ornamental. Protect it, unless you'd like a repeat of the Morgan incident." The phrase had stuck. So had the helmet. Vex now wore a matte black headguard during live drills. No one asked, no one dared. The cadets simply noted it, and by silent consensus, moved on. Tessa re-entered sparring class with full clearance on day 21. Her right shoulder had 95% mobility restored, and while the tendon strain still flared under stress, she could now push through drills without compensation. The brace was gone, replaced by kinesiology tape beneath her uniform. Her first day back, 3 cadets challenged her in succession. Not to humiliate her, but to learn. She held her own in the first match, won the second by using an opponent's height against him, and drew the third after being forced to disengage to protect her healing arm. It was the most exhausting day she'd had since arrival. That night, she collapsed onto her bunk, stared at the ceiling, and wondered if being a symbol was supposed to come with neck pain and constant requests for footwork demos. Her quiet legend continued to grow, but it came with unwanted complications. In week 5, a trio of cadets from the Xalari cohort cornered her outside the mess hall, their posture too casual, their tone just a bit too sharp. "Got a minute, Earthling?" one asked, his segmented arms crossed. Tessa raised an eyebrow. "Depends. You gonna try to duel me too?" The tallest one snorted. "Just want to understand. You're not faster, not stronger. You don't have neural overclocking or pressure glands. So how?" "Technique," she said simply. They stared at her. "No offense," said the second one, "but your species is barely above the survival threshold." Tessa exhaled slowly. "Yeah, well, maybe that's why we got good at surviving. Because we had to." She stepped past them, ignoring the muttered comment that followed. Later that night, she found a new message in her terminal inbox. From Commander Vex. Subject: ignore them. Message: they challenged you because they're insecure. You don't need to defend your biology. You already demonstrated its effectiveness. Let your training speak louder than your species. Attachment: combat scenario schedule. Week 6. You're cleared to co-lead simulation beta. Tessa stared at the message, surprised at the calm professionalism of it. Then she reread the last sentence. She was being asked to lead. Simulation beta was one of the more advanced group exercises, a multi-unit combat scenario designed to test adaptability under fluid conditions, typically reserved for third years and upper second years. Tessa was a first year. Co-leading it meant analyzing terrain layouts, managing team rotations, and adjusting to shifting enemy variables in real time. She didn't sleep much the night before. The scenario kicked off with a mock planetary insertion. Tessa led Squad 2, composed of mixed-species cadets who had never operated together. 1 Braskier, 2 Naharthi, and a jittery Veltran named Kilo, who mistook her warm-up lunges for a pre-battle ritual and copied them with such exaggerated intensity that he strained a thigh muscle. They had to pause for treatment before even leaving the starting zone. "Don't worship my stretches," Tessa muttered to him afterward. "Just loosen your hip sockets." But it looked sacred. It was tight hamstrings, not divine revelation. Despite the bumpy start, the simulation unfolded better than expected. Tessa adapted quickly, switching to guerrilla-style tactics when their main objective was compromised. She used elevation and terrain masking, redirected fire zones, and taught Kilo to throw a diversionary flare while rolling. They won the round with minimal losses and high resource retention. Instructor Charn didn't smile. He probably didn't have the muscles for it, but he nodded once at the end. Tessa counted that as a standing ovation. A week later, Commander Vex pulled her aside after morning drills. "You'll attend advanced tactics briefings starting tomorrow," he said without preamble. "You'll be excused from basic PT during those times." Tessa blinked. "Why?" "Because your instincts are good, and I want to see what happens when your decisions aren't limited by anatomy or instinct but by information." Tessa hesitated. "You trust me to lead?" "No," he said plainly, "but I trust you to learn." It might have been the closest thing to a compliment she'd get. By week 7, she had become part of a quiet shift that rippled through the academy. Alien cadets began customizing their drills with nods to Earth's training regimens. One squad tried interval sprints based on her rehab routine and called it Morgan Circuits. Another developed a grappling maneuver based on human judo and proudly labeled it Gravity Flip 3A, Human Edition. Tessa wasn't sure if she should be flattered or horrified. She was still icing her shoulder every night, still waking up sore and wondering when, if ever, she'd stop being the human who dropped Vex. She didn't want to be a hero. She wanted to graduate. On the 63rd day of her academy tenure, a quiet ceremony took place. Commander Vex stood before the full assembly of cadets and staff. His ribs had long since healed. The helmet was still present, as if by tradition now, but his posture was more relaxed. He addressed them in clipped, focused tones. "War is not won by strength alone. It never has been. The strongest warriors often fall first. Why? Because they think strength is enough." He let the words settle. "I made that mistake." Murmurs rippled across the ranks. "I challenged a cadet based on her biology. I assumed her species was inferior because it did not evolve like mine, because it did not look like yours. That was arrogance." Tessa stood at the edge of the crowd, heart hammering. Vex's gaze swept across the cadets. "Cadet Morgan is not stronger than me. She is not faster than most of you. But she studies, she adapts, she listens, and when it matters, she delivers." He pointed to the academy motto displayed behind him: "Endure, learn, prevail." That motto was chosen long ago, but we have only just begun to understand what it means. He paused, then delivered the new morning mantra: "Never underestimate Earthlings." A stunned silence followed. Then, slowly, cadets began to clap. Not many, not in rhythm, but enough. Tessa didn't clap. She just stood there, her shoulders still aching, watching the old guard bend just slightly toward the new. The bruises had faded, but Tessa Morgan still moved like someone who remembered pain. It showed in her posture, controlled, deliberate. She no longer flinched when the upper cadets addressed her, but she also never let herself forget what a bad landing or a mistimed strike could cost. The academy had adapted to her, but she'd also adapted to it. By the 8th week, she no longer stood out in drills for being human, only for being effective. The whispers had stopped. The glances now came with quiet respect, or curiosity, not doubt. She no longer walked alone to meals. Sulin usually met her outside the mess line, bouncing with four-limbed enthusiasm, and usually some bizarre question about Earth. Last time, it was about coffee. Before that, why humans cried. "So, the liquid just leaks from your eyes when you feel overwhelmed?" Sulin had asked, clearly fascinated. Tessa, exhausted after tactical evaluation, had only muttered, "Only on the bad days," and poked her mashed root vegetable mash. The attention had become normal. If anything, she worried about what would happen once she faded back into the crowd. That changed when the Academy posted the leadership roles for the end of cycle war games. Her name was on it. Not as a squad leader, not as a backup. Commander, Unit 6. That meant 30 cadets. Live combat sim. Full-grade tactical assessment. It was unheard of for a first year. Vex hadn't even told her in advance. She confronted him the next morning in the command wing. "You gave me command?" she asked, breathless. Vex didn't look up from his datapad. "You're ready. I'm first year. You're also the only cadet with a clean pass rate across all tactical sims, including adaptive field exercises. But," he finally looked at her, "Cadet Morgan, what you did to me on day one was not just a hit. It was an execution of strategy, of timing. You saw the path, took the risk, and accepted the cost." He leaned back. "This is not a reward. It's a test. Prove you're more than a single moment." She stood there a second longer, then nodded. "I will." The wargame simulation was set on a sprawling terrain mock-up, mimicking a canyon moon with unstable gravity fields and electromagnetic fog. 3 units, 30 cadets each, were given rival objectives: resource control, field integrity, and enemy disruption. Tessa's job wasn't to win through brute force. It was to outthink them. She sat in the prep zone with her team, now wearing the dark red designation stripes of Unit 6. A few of her cadets were skeptical. Not openly, but the kind of quiet hesitation that floated in posture and pauses. She addressed it head-on. "Some of you think I shouldn't be in charge," she said calmly. "That's fine. Think it. Just don't let it keep you from following orders when it counts." That got a reaction mostly subtle, mostly enough. The simulation launched at high pulse. Her unit moved like oil through fractured stone, low profile and organized. Instead of claiming territory outright, she sent decoys to broadcast false locations. Her squad planted hollow heat signatures on ridges and redirected enemy recon drones into ravines. She learned to let others take point when it suited the terrain, even let Sulin take control of a perimeter flank. Trust was faster than talent, if you learned how to spread it well. The other 2 units, led by upper-year cadets, underestimated the subtlety. By hour 2, they had depleted half their drone reserves chasing ghosts. Tessa's team still hadn't been pinned once. At hour 4, they made their move. Kilo, her Veltran radio man, spotted a tactical blind spot left in the resource grid. They slipped through with 3 squads, disrupted the field beacon, and left the opposition scrambling to regroup. In the final 10 minutes, Tessa ordered a withdrawal from the front to draw the enemy into the open, then looped back with aerial recon units and a surge detachment that snuck through a shadow corridor they had mapped in hour 1. The simulation ended in a decisive, almost embarrassing win. She'd lost 2 mock lives total. The other teams had bled more than a dozen. After the debrief, she found herself in the hallway outside the main hall, leaning against the wall, arm gently cramping from the weight of the gear. Vex appeared beside her, silent. "You watched?" she asked. "I did." She looked up. "Did I prove it?" Vex grunted. "You proved something." She didn't ask for more, didn't need it. The next morning, Vex changed the Academy's training motto. He gathered the cadets over 200 bodies from across 30 species and projected the revised doctrine onto the main holowall. The old motto, endure, learn, prevail, was still there. But now, beneath it, outlast, adapt, reframe. Then he stepped aside, and Charn took the platform to explain the philosophy. Enduring isn't enough if you're not changing. Learning means little if you're not reframing how you see the world, your opponent, yourself. Adaptation isn't a tactic, it's a way of thinking. No one said Tessa's name. No one had to. Graduation day came 6 months later. Tessa stood with her cohort on the polished basalt parade ground, newly cleaned for the ceremony. Her shoulder was scarred more from training than injury now, and her file was the cleanest in her class. She was not top in physical strength, not even top 3. She was second in tactics, first in scenario survival rate. But what mattered most was what came after. She'd been selected for the inter-unit exchange program, a rare post reserved for cadets expected to lead joint species operations. She was going to serve in real missions, as a human, as a representative, not the best, just undeniable. Before boarding the transport, she stopped by the auxiliary training ring, now mostly used for simulations, not duels. It was empty except for one figure. Vex, standing in the center, helmet off for once. You waited? She asked. He shrugged. Old instincts. Say farewell before they launch. She approached him slowly. You know, she said, I still replay the hit sometimes. Wonder if it was worth it. He raised an eye-ridge. Wasn't it? I don't know. Sometimes I think I'd rather be anonymous. Just graduate, get the pin, do my job. Vex studied her for a long moment. That's what makes you dangerous, he said. You never wanted to be remembered, you just wanted to do it right. He stepped aside, making space for her in the ring. Any final lesson? She asked, half grinning. Vex's mouth twitched. Just this, he said, and raised one hand to tap the side of his skull gently. Lead with this. He pointed to his ribs. Back it up with this. Then, quietly, as if the phrase had been waiting months to be said, never underestimate Earthlings. Tessa tilted her head, then offered her hand. Vex hesitated, then took it. She turned to go. He called after her. Cadet Morgan. She paused. Commander Morgan, he corrected. She didn't turn around, just kept walking, grinning as the transport ramp lifted behind her. Out among the stars, in the corners of alliances and battlefields where bones broke and species collided, there was now one common, whispered phrase on the lips of soldiers and skeptics alike. What year is it? Usually said after sparring with an Earthling, usually said by someone lying on the floor.